Gentlemen, we are now in 2026. That means it's time for our annual Who to Save For in Grand Summoners. I will say this year's looking a bit better than it was last year, but still a little bit dusty because we don't know all the crossovers coming out in 2026. We only know of one so far, which will be coming out on global, I would be assuming, in the next 2 to 3 months, and that is Madoka, which they're really good. They're great. We're going to be talking about them in this video. By the way, this isn't going to be in any order, so it's just whoever I want to do first and last and all that type of stuff. This unit right here needs to come out. Natasha is extremely strong for any Mono Dark team out there, specifically if we're talking about the Sword God Luan Mono Dark team. She provides quite a bit of stuff overall here, being able to give your team up to 60% DR, on top of the fact that she's also able to reduce the enemy's evasion rate and buff up all dark allies damage by 150%, means that you're getting the best of both worlds, some good damage and some really good tanking. She also has the ability to ignore the enemy's defense if she's above 70% HP, which is great. Another thing that you might be interested in is the fact that Natasha is able to reduce the enemy's physical res and buff up her own attack every time she uses her super art. Unfortunately, she does not have the ratio passive, so the attack buff becomes a little redundant, but the physical res, of course, is very good. The issue with this, though, is that the super art is kind of lengthy, so you can't really consistently stack this, especially if you're trying to use all aspects of the kit here, which means in most cases you're probably just going to be using the art, true art, and that's that. One last thing about Natasha that is very sneaky that I think is going to be a huge game changer for the Mono Dark team is her passive that buffs up all allies max HP by 10%. Considering the Sword God Luan already has a stat buff on his true art, yeah, I think it's true art. On top of this 10% max HP, you're going to be seeing incredible amounts of HP for your entire team. Once Natasha comes out, she's going to make the Sword God Luan team a meta contender. The only problem with Natasha releasing is that we have to get the other Charlotte first, the Fire Platoon leader Charlotte, that one, because Natasha is part of her saga. So until we get that Charlotte, we can't get Natasha. Hopefully, we luck out, and this is a saga coming out to us very soon. But with the way how global GS moves, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a very long time. But something that may not take us too long is going to be our anniversary unit this year. Well, I'm wagering it to be our anniversary unit. Let me say that. It's possible they pick somebody else, but I'm almost certain they're going to do this. And I'm talking about Orville D. Orville D Grand Verge is an incredible unit that utilizes not only what Light Orville was, but also what made Fire Orville so great. Like, he has the defense ignore that Light Orville has. He has attack stacking. But the big thing here is his super art. You pop off with the super art, ladies and gentlemen, and you get the super equip. EX Grand Verge. This super equip is just like how it was with Fire Orville, where you're able to use it for 25 seconds, but this super equip does not buff up Orville D's crit damage. It buffs up the entire team's art gauge by 20 on each use. It's on a 6-second cooldown, and the fact that it has a 20,000% multiplier means that it's kind of lying a little bit about the art gauge that is actually giving your team. Since 20,000 is a very good modifier for an equip, we aren't only getting the art gauge from the skill, we're also getting art gauge from the BE that this equip is generating. If you don't know what BE is, it's these little balls here that you see whenever you hit an enemy with an equip or skill or whatever. These BE orbs convert directly into art gauge, and they're very good to generate. The only issue with BE is that it's random who it goes to, so it's not as consistent as like just an art gauge buff. But you'll find out that Orville D generates so much art gauge and makes teams so fast that it feels like you're cheating at times. Of course, the art gauge isn't the only thing Orville D is good at. If you're using him alongside other light allies, he's able to buff up his damage up to a 320% buff, or if you're using him with fire allies, he gives himself more art gauge. And lastly, he also has a really good defensive buff here, being able to give everyone on his team 30% crit res. So overall, you can't go wrong with Orville D. This guy is a fantastic unit. He was the anniversary unit for JP, and I'm almost positive he's going to be the anniversary unit for global. One character that may take a bit to come out though is Shala. We probably won't see this unit till the end of the year, if I'm assuming, maybe middle of the year. But this unit is Haruto mixed with Hoka. That's the best way to put it. She's able to give your team tons of art gauge. His art gauge is type B, and she's also able to give you a percentage-based heal. But of course, just like Hoka, she has a super art that's able to give your team 300% damage up if you're not an Earth ally. If you're an Earth ally, you only get 200%. Either way, it's still a massive amount of damage that you're going to want to make use of. I would argue this super art is possibly a bit better in certain cases than Hoka's super art. Hoka's only buffs up crit damage, and this buffs up all damage. So even if you can't crit, you're still getting the additional damage buff. And then lastly, we can't forget about the stat cleanse and the 100% HP heal she has if she uses the art. Overall, Shala is just like a very good support unit. There's not really much else to say here. You put her on the team and she's gonna do work for you. This is one of those characters that if you start around the time she comes out, or if you're a brand new player and you've been struggling with supports or whatever, getting her is very beneficial for your account. It kind of just hard carries you and allows you to get a character that is pretty much timeless. Literally, if you get her now until, let's say, the end of the Ascended era, which I don't know if it will ever have an end, probably EOS at that point, she's gonna be beneficial. She will always be useful to you no matter what. The only bad part I can say about this unit is she is type B, and type B is so oversaturated that you will have to be a bit cautious about that. Either way though, fantastic unit. Now this character, I have no clue if she will actually release this year. If we see her, we are probably moving very quick. And that's going to be Worlds in Leon. Now, Leon has a bunch of cool mechanics, like being able to extend the duration of other Magia Drive characters. But the main reason I put her here is the main reason that I put Shala in this list, is that she is a fantastic support character. She gives your team tons of art gauge. Of course, her art gauge is also type B and type H, which means that even though you have other type B archgeners that are possibly on your team, it's not that big of a deal. Her type H archgen will still kick in, and you're still going to get some kind of archgen from her. Another thing to mention as well is that she is a poison and paralysis unit, so if you kind of need that for certain boss fights, that's very good. And she's able to apply a ton of damage res down on the enemy if you fulfill the conditions that her super art is asking. But what I said with Shala applies here. This unit is just a very good support character that you can throw on your team, and she's always going to be useful to you. If you're able to use her with other Blood Knights or Magia Drive characters, then hey, congratulations, you just made them even stronger. Now this one might be a bit of a meme. Just a bit, but I have to put it in there, okay? I have to. If you've been around the channel for a while, I gotta do it. Because the boy Freed is back. But he's a puppet now, I think. Puppet, ghost, I don't know what he exactly is, but he's always behind Henrietta. Now this unit on her own, I don't think is going to be anything too crazy. She's able to give art gauge to the entire team. If you're water, light, or dark, you also get additional art gauge. You have a true art that's able to reduce the enemy's crit res, water res, light res, and dark res by 100%, and then her super art is able to buff up the next ally's super art damage by 300%. Very strong super art damage there that can really pop off if you want it to. I think the thing that really makes this character unique though is her passive, being able to buff up everybody's damage against giant bosses, which is good, but she also gives you a bit of a true Centurion effect with this, since you're able to heal 20% of the damage you take against giant bosses. This adds another layer of sustain that I didn't think most teams probably needed, but it will be pretty beneficial for you if you're not running a healer, let's say, and you just have Henrietta on the team. Your team gets hit by an attack that you didn't have a shield for or whatever, you are healing a bit of that damage. I like it. I think it's cool. I mean, it's Freed again, so for all my Freed lovers out there, you can use her and go crazy with her. It's just unfortunate that we're not actually seeing a ascended Freed. And the last character I want to talk about here is Etica. Etica is a transformation character, and her transformation is something we've never seen before, which is called Lord of Feathers. Her Lord of Feathers makes everything in her kit better. Every single thing. Her art, her true art, her super art, everything becomes better with Lord of Feathers. And the whole goal of this unit is to get into that mode as soon as you can. I like to think of her a bit as like Shiro, how Shiro you want to get into Unlimited Blade works as fast as possible. She is the same way. If you are able to use her super art, this activates Lord of Feathers. When you activate this super art for the first time, you get 300 art gauge to the entire team. The entire team gets a free super art by letting her get to her super art. Once you're in Lord of Feathers, your art now gives a heal along with the barrier and art gauge it did prior. The true art's able to give you even a bigger damage buff, and nothing really happens with the super art. But the passives do come into play here. Whenever you're in Lord of Feathers, you get more art gauge and more heal amount. And lastly, she has the sword effect that Shiro does in Unlimited Blade works, where every few seconds, she'll just deal damage with her passive. And that's the case here. But her passive is able to buff up the damage that these sword attacks or feather attacks do by 4 times against any non-boss enemies. This could be very beneficial in certain fights where the boss spawns a bunch of ads and you need to kill them as quickly as possible. Just having this come in, every few seconds and slicing them all up is gonna be very good. Etica, I think, is gonna go down as a character like Ultimate Paladin Roy. How Ultimate Paladin Roy is valued for his instant tune to Arcage Venom Bullet, I think we're gonna be seeing the same thing here with Etica. Now the problem with Etica is that she's not able to buff up the entire team's arch gen apart from the art. The art is the only thing that gives you that 20 arc gauge. Another thing that may be a bit finicky with her is that you have to be careful when using that art. Since that art provides an 8k barrier, it will overwrite any other barrier that you have currently active. Let's say you're using Sistina alongside Shiro Emiya. If you pump Shiro Emiya's art, you have his barrier. Cool. But then you use Sistina's art. You see it overwrites the current barrier. The only time you don't have to worry about this is if you're using a taunt tank. The barriers will actually stack on top of each other. It's kind of the way how certain other buffs work in the game, where if you have like 30% DR from an art, you can't use another art that gives you 30% DR to give you 60% DR. You have to use either a passive or an equip to get DR to stack. This is a very big problem with another character we'll see in just a second that really hurts her team building. But with Etica, I think her barrier is pretty good at 8k. I don't think we need like these massive barriers, especially if you are taking only 1 damage anyway from certain attacks because you have 100% DR. But if you're using Etica and you wonder why you instantly got popped whenever you had the 30k barrier, that's probably why. Now let's talk about the only collab we know Global is getting this year, Madoka. The Madoka collab overall, I would say, is a solid 7 to 8 out of 10. It's brought some good units, but I want to say no one here is necessarily insanely busted, but there are some good gimmicks going on. Like Madoka, she's able to give your team passive DR for just existing on the team. And with her being on the team, she's providing you with a massive barrier that negates 12,000 damage. She's also giving you magic res as well. She's able to cleanse everybody's stats, elements, and give you a 40% stat increase, which acts as a heal, and her super art is able to cleanse a damage res debuff from each ally. This is very, very potent. If you have not used Kirisame against bosses that apply massive amounts of damage res debuffs, you do not understand how good this is on a super art. Once you start abusing this, oh yeah, you're gonna love this character. My main issue with Madoka though is that she has no kind of arch gen in the kit. The only arc gauge that we're really seeing is from her skill that gives her 40 arts, and I think her true weapon gives her 1 or 2 arc gauge over time. So she's gonna rely on other arch geners to be able to make her work, and if you're using her as the only damage mitigation character on your team, you're gonna need someone else that has a defense equip slot, just because she is not providing anything like that. So make sure you're at least running 1 defense equip, possibly 2 with her, and you should be perfectly fine. Considering this character is a light human as well, that means she can run on the Giga Chad Mono Light team, and this team is absolutely busted, so you won't have any problem with arch gen, damage mitigation, anything. The other character from part 1 of Madoka will be Homura. She's okay, she's not really insanely broken, but if you want to use her, you can. She's going to be pretty solid. In part 2, you're going to be having 3 characters, Tomo, Sayaka, and Kiyoko. Tomo is more of this breaking, damage dealing character, and this was the unit that I was warning you guys earlier that has a pretty weird skill that kind of messes up certain teams. Her skill gives everybody 20 arc gauge, that's a human at least. That's insanely broken. Very good. But then she has a damage barrier that negates 2k damage. That's good, that's solid if we weren't using other barrier characters. Like I mentioned with Etica, Tomo has this same issue where if you use, let's say, Shiro Emiya alongside her, you pop Shiro Emiya's art. Shiro Emiya gives you like that huge 15k barrier or whatever, and then you use Tomo's skill, that 15k barrier is no longer there, the 2k barrier is now applied, and it will wind up killing your team because 2k is really not enough to work with here. Apart from this one major inconvenience, the rest of her kit is kind of solid. Sayaka is arguably the best character from this crossover, or second best character next to Madoka. Sayaka is going to be a taunt tank that's able to revive herself 2 times if she ever dies, and when you get near death with her, she gets tons of additional bonuses. Unfortunately, she has no way of actually forcing herself near death, so you have to rely on the boss hitting you somewhat hard or using a equip on a different unit to be able to reduce her own HP. Or lastly, you could take her to LB7 to put put on a B3 claw to be able to reduce her own HP to a certain amount. But the B3 claw does become a bit of a dead equip once you get too low on HP, since it can kill you if you're not careful. Overall though, she's great. She's a passive arch gener too for all female characters in the game, and you really can't argue with a taunt tank that has 2 revives on them, not even including like blessed necklaces and stuff. This unit's gonna feel like she never dies. The problem is that how often can you actually get near death to make sure that she actually has all of her damage res passives. Kiyoko is the last unit from this crossover we want to talk about, and the final unit that we're talking about in this video. Kiyoko has a bunch of cool stuff in the kit that makes her very good. Like, she has tons of damage ups, not to mention art gauge buffs as well, and also being able to give her entire team 50 art gauge at the start of each wave. Very good here. The main issue with Kiyoko is the fact that she could have been such an amazing damage dealer if she had one other thing, and that was the attack ratio passive. This amount of attack buffing that she has in her kit is a little bit redundant if we don't have the ratio passive. Hopefully we get an equip later on that's able to have the ratio thing on it, so we can put that on Kiyoko to make her insanely good. But even without that, she's still going to be very strong. You're going to be seeing her deal tons of damage to enemies, and not to mention being able to provide her team with 50 art gauge at the start of each wave is very good too. Out of everybody from this crossover though, the 2 that I would recommend you guys get above all else is Madoka and Sayaka. And ladies and gentlemen, that is it for our 2026 Who to Save For. Tell me down below if there's any unit that I missed that you're looking out for. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I recommend check out this video pop up on your screen right now. It's my Mina's showcase. If you haven't seen this unit in action yet, you need to. She is incredible. Oh, but one more thing before you leave, don't forget to drink water.